and welcome to the UC Big News Show. I am delighted as ever to be joined by our regular stalwarts, including Jon Arnold, Brue, Craig Durr, and Zeus Kerravala. Welcome one and all, and it is quite a lot has happened since we last met, including a certain major vendor re-emerging from bankruptcy, and several massive events featuring some compelling products and even more compelling updates. Well then, shall we get stuck into some tasty news? This week, Mitel officially exited Chapter 11, wiping out about $1.15 billion in debt and slashing annual interest costs by around $135 million. With this new and clean balance sheet, CEO Taryn Lumba is positioning Mitel as a leader in secure, hybrid, unified communications for enterprise and frontline workers. But now comes the real test, Jon. Can they regain mindshare and momentum after emerging from the red?
Hey, Kieran, thanks. Yeah, it's a good question. And you say this is a tasty update. I'm not sure I have a great taste in my mouth about this turnaround, but we'll see. It's great to have money taken off or the debt go away. I have not seen any detail about what the new ownership structure is actually going to be, who's ultimately calling the shots here, because that's a lot of money to just make disappear pretty quickly. But that's what happens when these things don't work out. It's great to see that they're still here. Yes. The runway that they have, I think it's about 122 million, is not really a lot of money. I'm not sure how long that's going to carry them. So that tells me they don't have a long rope to, make this viable. But I think it sends enough reassurance to their customers and partners that they're still a going concern and that their partnerships are going to hold up. We'll see. I mean, obviously they're betting on, this hybrid model thing, which to me says it really speaks to two types of hybrid. And I don't know how much that's been really brought out, but yes, the hybrid model within the cloud universe, of course, is very important, but also the fact that, their survival depends on the prem market. And so there is a hybrid model of deployment as well of the actual hardware and, the units that are on site or in the cloud. And, obviously, we've all seen this movie before with Avaya. They had 3 acts. I think this is the second act for Mitel. So we'll see if there could be a third act here. But again, coming out of Chapter 11 is no guarantees of success. I have not heard of any changes at the top that might come as a result of this to keep the roadmap where it's supposed to be going. I know we're probably going to get an update. I think we have an analyst update in early July. We'll probably get more visibility then. But my main concern is, what is that ownership structure like now and who's really going to be calling the shots for where this thing goes. But, Avaya is not a precedent for what will happen next for Mitel. But, the warning signs are all there that we all see. And I just think the market is healthier having them in the game. And of course, being here in Canada, there's a soft spot to say, they just had their 50th anniversary recently. And that's a pretty big milestone. And we'll see, where the next chapter takes us. But Chapter 11 hopefully is the last chapter. And, all we can wait is on just to wait and see. So that's my high level take, and I'm sure you guys have some thoughts too.
I think the big difference, though, Jon, with the Avaya ones is I think, the analogy I've used is it's like the guy with a lot of debt, right? That makes a lot of money, but has a lot of debt, has 2 homes, 3 cars, things like that, a couple of yachts. Wipes out the debt, but then his lifestyle stays the same and winds back up in that situation again. And I think with the first 2 Avaya bankruptcies, they didn't really change their strategy. So they went through bankruptcy, wiped out the debt, didn't change the strategy, and then they wound up back in the same situation. I think the most recent bankruptcy that Avaya went through, Patrick Dennis actually put we're only going to focus on the global 1500 strategy. And first, now it seems like they got a fighting shot. And I think with Mitel, they were, since Tarun took over, they were kind of unwavering in their commitment to on-prem. In hybrid cloud, they've rebuilt the portfolio around that, and then they went through the bankruptcy process to be able to go and execute on it. It's not like they went through and they just continued trying to be all things to all people. And while people sleep on the kind of hybrid and on-prem market, there is a long runway for this stuff. I mean, you look on the compute side, the amount of money that Dell makes from having consolidated the legacy. I mean, Mitel is the only, other than Avaya, who's really going after a smaller, footprint. They're really the only kind of mid-market, mid-size, lower end of large enterprise player left in on-prem. And while in the North American market, I think lots and lots of companies are going to move to the cloud. Once you get overseas, Africa, East, a lot of European countries, you look at all the security and privacy concerns, Germany, France, things like that. I mean, that there's still a big market for that. In fact, at Cisco Live, when I was talking to Snora about it, they've actually kicked the on-prem innovation back into gear because they've got so many global companies looking at it. And so, the people have asked me when, will all communications be in the cloud one day? And my answer is maybe, but I'll long be dead by the time that happens. So I do think the opportunity is there for Mitel. They've reduced the debt. They got the product. Now the hard part is the execution part, though, right?
Yeah, I think that like you say, there's still obviously a big prem market out there, and this will give them maybe a little bit more chance for the Unify acquisition to actually work. And but I still think they run the risk of becoming really just a reseller of other people's products, because they are partnering, right, both for contact center and UC with other players. And so the Mitel brand itself, I don't know how much that's going to carry them down the road. But as you say, there aren't too many left in the game, but they certainly have all the pieces there. And I think it's a safe bet to say they will no longer pursue the consolidator path. I think they've done enough of that. It's more like, instead of accumulating assets, you decumulate and just try to survive. So,
yeah.
And I wonder out loud if the European market that is loyal to Unify will have any issues when considering this whole Mitel US based, Canadian based, I guess. But coming out of bankruptcy, if that would impact that, because that's an important cash flow that they acquired there. And that's something that's really going to be continuing to fuel what they're talking about here in terms of the new strategy. It's one area I'm going to keep an eye on.
Yeah, well, there isn't another place to go if you want to stay with, a private cloud version or an on-prem version. There just aren't. I mean, there's Cisco, I guess, but other than that, how many options are there for me? Avaya has admitted they're punting on that, right? So.
Yeah, well, there's parallels in contact center with like Genesis getting away from the prem, and there's a big risk there. Like you say, they may have exited too early, and we'll see. Again, that's why I wonder what is the management going to be. What is it going to be changed at the top to pursue that, or are they going to just, as you say, stay the course? We'll see.
Yeah, that's exciting times, and I'm sure reassuring times if you're a Mitel customer and partner as well. Moving on to the next topic, and it is quite a science fiction inspired one, because the technology blows my mind still, is Google Beam. Now, I guess Google formally debuted Beam at the recent InfoComm 2025. This is the evolution of Project Starline. There was a collaboration with HP, and the way they use it is AI-powered volumetric video and light field displays, no headsets. Beam strives for 3D telepresence that even includes spatial audio and real-time voice translation. Is this a genuine hybrid collaboration revolution that we've been waiting for, Mel? Or is it a cool demo that might be hard to scale? What's your perspective?
Well, let's start with the cool demo part. It was actually kind of amazing, and I'm not one to gush about products, but I swear I thought I was being punked. Like, I got in there and I was like, there's no way that you're not actually sitting across from me. I mean, it's really that realistic. And for you, those of you who have actually been through the demo, it's quite amazing. So I think, the biggest thing here is that there are other meeting kind of capabilities that have similarities. This one is not as expensive. I don't think that the price point, it's around 25,000. I don't think the price point is out of touch with reality of, like, could this actually be a viable solution? Because if you think about it, if executives need to meet face to face multiple times a year, and this solves that, of like not having to get on an airplane or travel, that pays for it alone. You know, I mean, it's just, the experience really does feel like you're there. And then I think there's a couple of other things about it. One, the design of it, it just, everything seems to sort of disappear because you are really focused on the person, but there's also not cameras pointing at you. So it really creates this natural kind of face-to-face conversation. Like you're truly in a shared space. You know, I think that there have been some studies on it these are HP and Google studies, like some kind of their initial tests show that there's some like really key communication metrics. So 28% increase in recall of meeting details, 39% more nonverbal communication, and at least a 14% increase in focus on conversation partners. That totally makes sense to me because of you're just right there. You really do feel like you're right in the same room with somebody. So
And Mel, the comment you made about executive travel, I find interesting. Do you think that's the use case for this, or is it more you and I want to work on an object together and I can show it to you in 3D? Because the telepresence market was supposed to cut down on executive travel, but people still traveled.
Because I think it doesn't feel natural. And I think that this feels so much more natural than being on a screen with people. People tend to, like, if you're trying to multitask and while you're on the HP Dimension with Google Beam, it's going to be really obvious. It's not like you're just sort of like your head is there in a box on the video conferencing. I do think that that's a use case for it. But then if you look at like what you're talking about for people to kind of collaborate on design and things, there are a bunch of solutions for that just haven't taken off. And I think the big problem with that is that they require headsets or glasses. And that's a thing. I mean, we all did the demo, was that last year at Webex 1. It was cool. And it's really actually kind of, you go, wow, it's impressive. I hate having that thing on my head. I hate it. And no matter how impressive the imaging is, it might be something that you're willing to use with a design team. You know, they show like a tennis shoe and you really can like see it so much differently than if I hold up. I'm going to hold up my little eye contact camera Pro Box. You can't really see what I'm doing here. If I were to talk to you about the design of the box and all this, you're not going to see the dimension and how this is. With the HP Dimension, you really do feel like you could reach out and grab it. But I don't want to have a thing on my head. That's a personal choice. But I have heard that from a lot of people that it's not comfortable. I get actually nauseous from those things. So I do think there's a couple of different use cases, these kind of high stakes meetings where you really do feel like you have to be face to face. There is that element of, you can work on objects and designs and things together and really be able to see it. When I did my demo, I was with Greg Barabalt from HP and he had an apple in his hand and I could see all of it. I could actually see the fabric in his sport coat, the folds in the fabric. I mean, it's really like, it's so different than being on just a regular camera. Although it does also support, it's meant for one-to-one interactions, but it does also support
Zoom and Google Meet.
Zoom.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple
the
of
Google Meet
ones.
platform. And that's kind of the fallback on that. You were asking about the use cases, and I talked to that team a lot too. And although they held up some key accounts that pre-ordered, like Salesforce, which is probably diving into the executive communications or the enterprise HR communication things, I think one of the early beachheads is really going to be things like telemedicine. It's going to be maybe even teleeducation when you want to have those intimate connections. There was an RFP that was floating around last year or so, which was remote doctors' pharmacies. So think CVS or something like that has Minute Clinic that has a lot of brick and mortars but don't have doctors in those locations. And I think this is when Steelcase and Logitech were working their Project Ghost solution for that as well. So I think those early beachheads are going to be something like that. I don't think it's going to create a new market per se. It will be marquee project and has a fantastic experience. The translation part, what I saw about that real-time translation is just an incredible experience. It felt very Star Trek in the moment, being there and having that take place. But I'm looking for those use cases that are outside of the enterprise as well.
Yeah. So in that case, though, somebody's buying it and I go to it, right? Versus a company.
Exactly.
Yeah. And again, that follows the telepresence model, which largely wanted to become a solution looking for a problem. And I do think for like law firms, your case of telehealth, there are some interesting use cases for that. Are they going to drop the money to do that? The healthcare organizations are also notoriously cheap, right? So
it is. Yeah, I mean, and that's it. Now, the other thing that's a little bit better than telepresence in the past is the remediation of rooms is not nearly as big and challenging as it was before. You don't have to install special lighting, ventilation. You don't have to remediate. Now, they still have it so that you do have certain furniture that is the solution, and you have to be seated within a certain range to get the optimal view. But it's small enough that it can fit into pretty readily medium to even larger, small rooms, if you will. But I get it. 25,000 means 50,000 for two of them because you need two to have an experience. You have to pay for the Google Beam service, and then on top of that, you may have your Zoom or license as well. I think I'm really excited about it. I think it's got a really incredible experience, like Mel's saying. It's a matter of seeing if it finds legs in the markets that it thinks it's going to find legs in.
Yeah, I don't think UCaaS is a particularly viable use case for this, but sure, lots of specialized areas. I find it interesting too that this is, HP's second run at this. They were first in the game with Halo, if you go back far enough, which I find interesting because this is a 3D, very immersive kind of thing, and the origins of Halo and the whole telepresence space come out of the animation industry. That's what it was invented for, because they didn't have the bandwidth or the means to collaborate remotely back then on animation films. So that's what Halo was invented for. So back into showbiz, here we go with 3D, which adds nothing to calls like this, but there are use cases. It also kind of bumps up against the metaverse stuff too, right? Because now you're just taking virtual to another level. And again, you can do it without headsets. It's not easy, but we're probably a generation away from the wearable tech that's going to get that problem solved. Certainly with the glasses that can maybe support a 3D experience, that might change the game a bit. And then, of course, if it can work on a mobile phone somehow, that would really change the game. But I think we're a ways out from that.
Yeah, but to Mel's point, as long as you got to put headsets on, adoption's always going to be, very specialized. So, so whether this takes off or not, who knows? But I applaud them for getting to the point where they actually have a usable demo now.
Yeah, fantastic. As you guys say, I think there's going to be some very distinct, very peculiar use case for this that's going to emerge completely out of nowhere in a very niche industry that will take everything by storm. So excited to see how this develops over the next few years.
Yeah.
And staying on InfoComm, there was also some very interesting new devices announced that seem to be maybe not quite as revolutionary, but game-changing in their own distinct way. Craig, what can you tell us about them?
There was a lot of new devices that came out at this event from companies you may have heard of. They're back into the video bar market again. So the question that always lingers is one more bar needed or not? But some of the people that have announced bars, for example, is Hudley, came out with the C1. Now, this one has a really unique design that breaks away from the smooth, soft edges that we've seen before. This is a very square. You see the speakers. It's designed to be noticed in the room. Very Norwegian, lean forward design again. And so we'll have to see how the design of it takes well. The audio is really great. The team is very proud of the work they've done on it. I think one of the most interesting references I heard is someone told me they felt like it was a flashback to the Dolby 5.1 days where they were looking at the center channel speaker below their TV as they were looking at it. But it's a great audio. More importantly, what it is, it's an indication that Hudley is leaning more into their modular camera architecture. And that is where the really key strength is. They've already got the Crew solution that does 3 or 5 cameras. Combine this now with front of bar, and you start adding audio and speakers and microphones in a modular sense as well too. It's an interesting play. Another one that really caught my eye, there's two of them. One was already announced before, but it was its first kind of debut, which was Barco's ClickShare Hub. Now, what this is again leaning into a modular architecture, but it's designed for the Android system, in particular, the Microsoft Devices Ecosystem Program, or MDEP. So this is a solution that puts an MDEP box in a room and allows the end user or the IT administrator to choose the cameras and choose the other peripherals that plug into it. So you can have the benefits of that Microsoft Android program and still kind of customize that as well. And then there was one more that actually caught my eye, and this is probably geeking out, but I'm curious about what takes place, is that MaxHub actually, who's done a lot of stuff on behalf of Microsoft, I think one of the leading edge producers of things, they've actually produced a PC-based video bar. Now, we've seen this tried before in the past. I think Lenovo has one. Previously, there's another company that's done one, but it's never really taken off. And it's an interesting idea because one of the unique values of the video bar is that ease of installation. And it's been an Android-driven experience, or I should say Android devices have benefited from that. But here's another company trying to come back in with a PC-based version as well. So it's a small nuance, but it probably speaks to a larger show strategy, which was obviously InfoComm leans in towards the professional AV market. UC is an important influence about that. But companies were highlighting what they did to help support that Pro AV modular market. So modularity for larger room solutions. Poly introduced an A2 speaker box, which is a modular speaker spot for audio pickup within rooms. We're going to talk about it in a moment, but Cisco has kind of expanded on their AV over IP solution as well. And a lot of these modular things. Zoom even talked about how it is designing its solution, or has an iteration of a Zoom solution for Pro AV, where they can break out separate channels of NDI cameras and things like this for a little bit more control in those situations. So there's a lot of cool stuff, especially if you lean into those large rooms and those hardware solutions. Take a step back and you have to say is how many bars can the market handle, and is large rooms still an important development area right now? Frankly, the trends that I'm seeing in the numbers I'm looking at is we're moving back down towards medium rooms, smaller rooms kind of being at the forefront of enablement right now.
Craig, do you think though with the bars that there has to be some change right now because of the multi-camera thing? Like everybody's doing the kind of cinematic framing, and it really does make the experience, if there are multiple people in the meeting, it just makes it so much better. And
I agree.
But doesn't that make you wonder, like, okay, so what's next? What's the next upgrade? And it's kind of like,
well, I was fortunate to host a panel at InfoComm, which was about multi-camera solutions and leaning into that. So you're hitting exactly one of those key points. It was a full room. We had people on the panel from Crestron, Poly, Hudley, Logitech there, and the room was standing room only. So people are really interested in that. Mm-hmm. I do agree with you. I think bars just become an important element when they play into that multi-camera solution. Let them do the audio and speaker optimization in the front room camera, but pairing with these other cameras. And one of the small nuances that I think is really driving this is I think people are accepting that these electronic EPTZ cameras, as opposed to the big mechanical ones, can do the work in a large room. They're less intrusive. People like them. So that's why Hudley's getting some great mind share with their true solution. Small, discrete EPTZ cameras around the room that can make it very intimate and very personal, like you're asking about.
Well, shall we move on to our next topic, because InfoComm wasn't the only major event in June, and as Craig alluded to, there was some pretty massive Cisco and Webex news, including, I guess, this new pitch of Webex 2.0 almost as a completely full stack platform, whether that's Thousand Eyes observability, Meraki networking, Splunk power security, as well as the traditional collaboration and communications features that are at its center. This multi-tool orchestration pitch feels like Cisco's most serious attempt to go beyond individual products and sell a cohesive workplace ecosystem in quite a while. Did you find it a convincing pitch, Zeus?
Yeah, Cisco Live, obviously their big user event, and it was the first one under G2 Patel as chief product officer, right? And so unfathomably, Cisco has not had a single product owner since the Pankaj Patel days back 20 years ago. So, and one of the things that G2's promised, though, is products that are more tightly integrated together. And so, back in the day when I was a reseller, Cisco had this architecture called AVID, architecture voice video integrated data. And people just inherently believe that Cisco voice on a Cisco network work better, right? And so now they've got this thing called distance zero, which obviously from a communications perspective, you can kind of understand we're trying to make us closer and things, but they bring a lot of security and observability into that. And I think this year at Cisco Live was probably in a way, the first reemergence of that old architectural approach where they try to build Cisco on Cisco on Cisco. And so, and we've seen it manifest itself already, right? The Cisco devices, Cisco endpoints all have thousandized agents built into it. So from a troubleshooting perspective, that's much better. The new PTZ camera, is an Ethernet-based device, so they brought some networking knowledge into that, and so you can plug it in with one, with one cable, and it configures itself and things. And so I think Cisco's done a much better job of bringing the value of Cisco to its Webex customers versus having Webex run as a standalone thing. And, given the competitive landscape and how much share Microsoft has and Zoom is the second, they need to approach this market a little bit differently, right? And so I think we're going to see much more of this, I think, at Webex 1. But I do think from a Webex perspective, although Webex wasn't front and center with the announcements, the underlying theme of architectures and distance zero, I think, gives Cisco a better approach, the best approach to collaboration they've had in a long time, because they're now bringing the power of the platform where they were trying to go almost on a feature by feature battle before, which, it's just a much tougher way to compete.
It's a smart move by them. It's leaning into their unique differentiator there, and it's important. They were hinting at that a little bit before with how they were just beginning to explore the spaces group, which is the technology that Meraki kind of brought on board that does the room smart buildings and stuff like that. But you're right, leaning into the observability, the security, AI oriented infrastructure positions them well. Now it's going to keep them, I think, in those large enterprise customers, which is okay.
Sure.
That's appropriate for them, and they should lean into it.
It's crazy they didn't do that before, right? So it just shows how disconnected all the product groups were before, and that is the one thing that G2's brought, is the willingness to have the teams work better together. I think they've also had an interesting rebirth on the concept of openness. That I know, you and I were both big fans of the fact that you can run Teams natively and Zoom natively on it on their devices. And I talked to some of their partners about it. I stopped by the Worldwide Tech booth and Converge One, and they were both saying it makes their lives easier too, because every customer they have is a multi-vendor deployment. And so if Cisco's trying to wall you into their garden, then there's a lot of stuff they got to do in the background to force these things to interoperate. Now with native interoperability, in fact, the Worldwide guy said they actually like using Control Hub for team, even if it's an all Microsoft Teams environment. The Webex Control Hub actually manages that better than the native Teams tools, right? So that interoperability has made the resellers' lives a lot easier.
I agree. I think you're hitting exactly like these. You mentioned they did announce the Zoom integration, and to break it down, it's a Webex home screen UI experience, but when you click and go into a Zoom call, it brings up the Zoom native UI. This is a little bit different than the interop story they had before, which is a little bit like WebRTC-ish. So you get full operability and control, and you get to have the device goodness, all that video, audio, AI native in that Zoom experience then as well too.
The interop story before, I actually tried to use it a couple about a year and a half ago in one of the Cisco offices, and you had to go get the meeting number, type it in, stuff like that. And you could run it, but it was so much work that it was just easier to click the link on my laptop. Right now it's to click the link on the screen. So
great. Well, shall we wrap up with looking ahead to the events for this month? And it is a bit of a fallow season, given we had such a bit of a busy June. I think the only one of note, guys, is the Zoom analyst event, Zoom Perspectives, which is arriving for July. But otherwise, it's a big thank you to everyone who is attending today, Mel, Craig, John, and Zeus, and from myself. If you do see our lovely analysts at the Zoom Analyst Show, please go and say hello. And please also give us a like and share on social media and LinkedIn. Or if you have your own perspectives of insights on Google Beam, on Mitel, or on this new Webex pitch, please comment and let us know. I've been Kieran Devlin of UC Today, hoping to get a chance at this Google Beam to see how its real-time translation works with my accent and see if it really is up to scratch.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching.